So this is my first conversation in my conversation series on a Frisch perspective. And as my first guest, I have with me Pastor Sam Coberley. And so we're going to get to know him a little bit and ask him some questions. But the reason I chose him is because he knows everything. He is the most all-knowing pastor I've ever, well, maybe not, but he knows a lot about certain subjects, or at least has a high interest in them, right?
I feel like you have me mixed up with Al Moore, but it's so good to be here.
And thank you. Thank you for being the guinea pig, the first one on this series. But I think it's so great to talk to you because you're a good friend of mine. We work together here in New Hampshire, and that's where I wanted to start. Because you're not actually from New Hampshire. You started doing ministry up here, and we'll get more into your ministry itself, but how did you get from where you started to over here in New England? You're from Kansas, actually.
Yes, so I always tell people there was a really large tornado, and it picked up my house, and then I woke up
Because that's how people get places when they're from Kansas.
Absolutely, because you can't get here from there. So there had to be a supernatural storm or something.
That's right, I've learned that from the Wizard of Oz.
Amen. But actually, I was at a pastor's conference last weekend, and they said that Pastor Sam Coberley is a New Hampshire native. And I was so excited because I said after 9 years, the beard has allowed me to blend in. But I'm not a native. I did grow up in Kansas and parts of Colorado. My dad was a pastor, so I grew up going to church. I tell people I fell asleep in more sermons than they'll probably hear in their lifetime. But my senior year in high school, our church took a missions trip, and we came to Londonderry, New Hampshire. We spent a week knocking on doors, filling out surveys for a church plant, handing out bottled water at the park. And it was an amazing experience, but I thought it was just a one-off thing. At the end of the week, I didn't ever anticipate coming back. But little did I know that God would use that trip to wreck my life in a good way.
Wow.
And prepare my future wife, Crystal, and I for ministry here in New Hampshire. So God's plans are always better than ours.
So what you're saying is God bringing you to New England was wrecking your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But in a good way.
But I recommend it.
So you're in New England. You fit in now because you have a beard. But New England is a little different than where you're from. You're out from the Midwest. And what are the differences you've noticed doing ministry here and being in this world versus being like in the Midwest?
Well, we have much better coffee here in New England.
Yes, especially when you have the right mug.
Absolutely, which just like to highlight the Frisch perspective.
It has nothing to do with the fact that I gave him that mug.
This is a great mug. There are some differences. I grew up in a town of about 10,000, and we had 26 evangelical churches in the community that I grew up in. So there were people who didn't go to church, who didn't pursue a relationship with God, but I don't think there were opportunities. There were places that they could go. They all had family that was a part of the church. Coming to New England was shocking at first as a high school student because we would be playing basketball in the park and start talking about Jesus, and would have conversations with people who didn't know about Jesus. They couldn't tell you he was the Son of God. And so I think one of the differences is just biblical knowledge. But what we found since being in New Hampshire is it's not that people are opposed to the gospel. In fact, over the last 9 years, we found that people want a relationship with Jesus. They're just waiting for someone to tell them the good news. And so it's an exciting place. I can't think of any place that I would rather be than serving right here in New Hampshire.
That's awesome. So really God was leading you this way and gave you a heart for the people here. And I like what you said. It's easy to think that in another place it's easier. There's no place like home, right?
Right.
Little Kansas reference. But actually everywhere the human heart has the same need.
Amen. Absolutely.
And you see that here. And if anything, the drier the climate, the greater thirst there is. And so spiritually, there's actually a great thirst here.
Amen. Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
I would absolutely agree with that. When Crystal and I first moved, we had people say, "Oh, why are you going to New England? It's pastor's graveyard." And I'm a little slow on the uptake. It took me a couple years, but I finally came up with a response. It was the week before Easter, and I was studying the resurrection story, and it was like God just hit me with a ton of bricks, and he said, hey, this whole thing started in a graveyard. And so just because it seems like that there are many people who are far from God, that's setting the stage for where God is at work. And certainly there's been times in the history of New England where God has moved powerfully. All of the revivals seem to start here. People finding God, discovering Jesus, and starting a relationship with him. And we're seeing it again right now. I really believe that we're at the beginning stages of experiencing revival in New England again.
Wow. That's exciting, and it's neat, and it's what Jesus said, pray to the Lord of the harvest
Amen.
To send laborers. And so really, I think a lot of people I've known who've lived here in New England, and I want to encourage New Englanders, I know you've prayed for years and years, and God is answering those prayers. He's bringing church planters, he's bringing new pastors, and people that really have not just a desire to be in New England because it's pretty, but a heart that God has given them for this place and for the people of this place. I mean, don't we see that? Laborers coming in here?
Absolutely. God is bringing them from all over the world. We have a friend, both of us, not too far from here, came from Brazil.
Yes,
and is serving in Vermont, right across the border.
Yes, Pastor Lierte. Hello, Pastor Lierte, if you're watching.
Good to see you, sir. And I have another friend that was serving in Connecticut, came from South Africa, so God's bringing the nations to New England. But also, and I believe it's always been happening, but we're noticing it more maybe, is he's raising up a generation of New Englanders. And really, they're being more effective.
Of course.
We're seeing people within the harvest who've started a relationship with Jesus, and now they're reaching their friends, neighbors, family, postal employees, and ice cream salesmen.
That's right.
It's exciting to see what God is doing with New Englanders, reaching New Englanders.
It's the way of Jesus, really. He took these men that were from Israel, and they reached many Israelites. He met a Samaritan woman, right? And
That's right.
She reached many Samaritans. So really, it's the plan of Jesus to train, but then it's the people from that area who do most of the evangelism and the reaching of people. And I want to talk more about evangelism because this is the heart of Pastor Sam. You can already hear it. He's here to reach people with the gospel, the good news of Jesus. So if I open the lid a little bit, he's just going to talk about that. And I won't get to the first few questions I really wanted to get to are just to get to know you a little bit. Because there are people who are hearing this Pastor Sam. I know you're pretty well known. I think you're up there with some of the great preachers. I mean, Rick Warren, he's pretty well known, and maybe Francis Chan, and then Sam Coberley. But for the few people out there that might not know who you are, I just thought it'd be fun to get to know you a little bit. So I kind of got a glimpse the other day that you apparently really like ice cream.
Oh, amen.
It's one of your favorite foods.
Amen.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
what in your opinion is the best ice cream out there?
Oh, that's a tough question. That's like
Come on, you're the ice cream expert.
asking to describe friends. So not only does New England have the best coffee, you guys have the best ice cream too. I didn't really get into
Come
ice
to New
cream.
England for ice cream.
Amen.
You heard it from Sam Coberley himself.
And in the summer, like every farm stand comes alive. Like you guys sell your own ice cream. I love Chunky Monkey from Ben & Jerry's. Cookie dough is a favorite. But I really think the best ice cream I've ever had comes from Sanctuary Dairy Farm in Sunapee, New Hampshire. They have their own cows, so the milk is fresh, the ice cream is fresh.
Okay.
And a young man named Beck is the person who started that, and it's good ice cream.
And that is where?
That's in Sunapee, New Hampshire, right on Route 103.
Oh, no bias there.
That's right.
His church actually was started in Sunapee, New Hampshire. So, but Ben & Jerry's is up here.
And
right?
Beck, if you want to give me free ice cream, my address, no.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of promotion right now. Thank you for holding up my mug again. But in Vermont, right across the river, we have Ben & Jerry's. Now, a lot of people know about that.
Yes.
Where would you put that on the scale next to the Sunapee ice cream?
It's in the top 5.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it does measure.
Chunky Monkey is delicious. And then
What's in Chunky Monkey? By the way, I'm pretty sure from Ben and Jerry's names, that's just some sort of a pun. It doesn't actually have monkeys in it, right?
well, I heard recently that as humans we're eating more bananas than monkeys, which totally makes sense. I don't remember the last time I ate a monkey. I don't know about you.
No, I try to avoid eating them.
No monkeys in Chunky Monkey. It's a base of banana ice cream. This is like deep theological
Yes.
chocolate chunks and walnuts.
Yes.
And
You
it's
probably have used it in sermons.
delicious goodness right there. They're gonna serve it in heaven.
That's how you know. That's when people talk about a taste of heaven. For you, Chunky Monkey.
That's it. It's
is
good
there.
stuff.
But does that Sunapee ice cream have anything equivalent to that?
They do actually, I just discovered that they have banana ice cream. I have not tried it yet, but
There you
I'm anticipating. But I waited too long. It's the end of the season, so I got to go back next year.
All right. So we know your views on ice cream now. What about video games? I think you like video games. Your shirt there kind of indicates that. And yeah, you were showing me your phone case is awesome. You got to see this guy's phone case if you've never seen one.
It's on the charger right now. We'll have to put it in post-credits.
Yeah, but back of this phone, the case actually is a video game. It looks like a Game Boy, I guess?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was going to ask you, what's your favorite console?
That's a great question. So I would.
It's like ice cream. It's
It
hard
is.
to
It's
choose.
hard. So many good friends. So the best video game ever made is GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64. Everybody in a 35 to 40
I
range.
didn't know that you felt that way. So
Absolutely.
something about shooting people. There's.
Hey, I live in Newport. We have Ruger. Gun manufacturer is life. But
The real reason you were drawn to this area.
That's right.
Guns.
Super Mario Bros. Is what I grew up. Duck Hunt, back to the gun theme.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I love bowling on the Wii because it's something my wife and I can do together.
So those sound like a lot of Nintendo.
A lot of
games.
Nintendo.
You
Yeah.
like Nintendo a lot. Okay, maybe that's one reason that we're friends is
That could be.
because we both like
That
Nintendo.
and the cool glasses.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about those glasses.
Huh.
I'm glad you brought that up because, I don't want to, necessarily bring this out in public, but I'm going to. But, I started wearing these bright glasses, and he used to just have plain glasses like everybody else, and I kind of get the feeling I inspired you.
You were an inspiration. No, when we ordered these, they came from China. They were supposed to be gray, but when we opened the box, they were blue. And
Something was lost in translation.
It was lost in gray and blue are the same if you speak, Cantonese. But I was actually excited, and I said, now I will fit in with my buddy Tim.
Okay. Well, you already fit in with me.
Thank you.
Because anybody who's as weird and crazy as I am. But what I want to ask you now is a little bit of a personal preference view, but more controversial than ice cream or consoles, although those are pretty controversial. But Bible translation. I don't even know how to ask that. Just Bible translation. Tell me, Sam.
I am for them.
Good.
We should have more of them.
So having them in our language is a good thing.
Absolutely.
And hopefully you've watched all my videos on Bible translations. I don't think he has. But that is a big topic for people because a lot of new Christians don't even know what they are.
Absolutely.
So maybe not for the purpose of scholarly, saying this I know for sure is. From your perspective, what are some translations that you like?
So I grew up with the King James,
Me
as
too.
I think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
So if I have a verse memorized, I'm probably quoting it in the King James.
Usually has some these and thous. And
It does.
Things like that.
But when I first started using my iPad to preach, and it wasn't an attempt to be relevant, I just don't see really well. And so having a Bible that lights up really nice was super helpful in being able to make the font bigger. And so at the time, the only translation that they had was the ESV. And you could buy an ESV app for $1.99. And so I downloaded it, and I preached with it for like 3 weeks, and I had a gentleman who came to church who said, I love the fact that you preach out of the USV. And so he went and bought
ESV.
ESV, English Standard Version.
Yeah.
So he went and bought like 2 cases of Bibles to give away to people, and he said, Pastor Sam loves the ESV. But
Isn't it on the back of the ESV boxes now?
Probably.
Right?
Yes.
Pastor Sam Coberley endorses, yeah.
But I didn't even know. So legitimately, I just downloaded it because it was $1.99 and they had really good fonts. But I do now, after having studied it, I like the ESV. I like the New Living Translation, the New King James. But I encourage people to read something that they can understand.
Yes.
And even audio Bibles. We've had some people that don't enjoy reading, and audio Bibles count.
Yeah.
Having the Word of God.
Some of them
read
are
to you.
dramatized.
That's exciting.
So not only are they the Bible being read, but it's like acted out with different voice actors, and there's background.
Which can be traumatic depending on what book of the Bible you're reading.
Yeah,
but
Revelation can be a pretty interesting one to get through.
not for late at night.
Yeah, right. Give you some interesting dreams if you read that. But the ESV, I love this topic, so that's why I'm bringing it up. Not because you like it, but because I like it.
Perfect.
But the ESV is related to the King James.
Right.
It's actually an update of a couple of other translations that were
Right.
based off of the King James.
Yes.
So the ESV is very comfortable for a lot of people, but it's a more modern English than the
Yes.
King James. So it's really good that way. And I know a lot of people watching these videos love the ESV. So they would be like, yes, that's definitely a good one.
In the sovereignty of God, He directed me to the right translation.
Well, it is the
Even
elect
when-
standard version,
That's it.
as many people like to say. But the ESV, I have said, is very popular, partly because it's so accessible.
Amen.
Which you were saying that you actually started using it because it was available on the iPad.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
And so I think a lot of people, and I love that the Crossway, so shout out to Crossway who produces the ESV, makes it widely available, even for free. Like on
Right.
Kindle, it's free. So
Absolutely.
if you're looking for a good Bible, get an ESV for free on Kindle. It's a good place to start. So yeah, ESV is good. KJV is what we grew up with.
I feel like in our youth, that was the youth pastor Bible. You know, as we were growing up, like the senior pastor had the King James, and then the youth pastor would have the New King James. But
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. But now there are so many different translations being used. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure that in your ministry, you actually use a variety.
I do.
Yeah. But ESV is one of your favorites.
It is.
But you'll just use whatever?
For the most part.
Okay.
I love for fast reading, if I'm going through a book, the NLT is great.
Yes, New
And
Living Translation.
Even
Yep.
the Message.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that, but go ahead.
Yeah. I really appreciate Eugene Peterson and what he was attempting to do.
A lot of people have enjoyed that, yes.
And I would consider it more of a paraphrase. But
Exactly. And that's important for people to know. On a side note here, when we're talking about translation, some Bibles are actually trying to take the original language of the Bible writers and putting it into our language. But the Message is taking the Bible that's in English and then paraphrasing it to make it even more colloquial and in some ways more relevant to how we think and talk. And so it has its uses, but just so you know, it's not a direct translation. It has a little bit different use. Personally, I wouldn't use the Message for preaching. I would use the Message for personal use and to read alongside other translations. But for preaching, I like to have something really accurate. And so the English Standard Version is a good one. I, as you know, also really like the New King James and the Christian Standard Bible.
yes.
Which actually is a bit related to your connections, because your church is actually in the SBC, the Southern Baptist
yes.
Convention. Not that the Christian Standard Bible is a Southern Baptist Bible. It's not. But it is produced by Holman,
Right.
right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that's tied with the Southern Baptists.
It
Am I
is.
right on that?
Yes, I remember I was at a convention in Indianapolis the year that Lifeway really started promoting that after Holman had translated it, and they do a great job. And
Yeah.
That's a great
It's a really
translation.
good one. And I actually hope that after this interview, it will inspire you to read it more and use it more.
I should.
Because I think it's a balance between not only those who want accuracy, which you get with the English Standard, but actually what you mentioned earlier about why we're drawn to the New Living Translation, right, and even the Message. The CSB is a little bit more dynamic.
It is.
And very relatable in how it words things, but still, I think, really accurate. It's still a good translation.
And I love the fact with their name that they went for it. I mean, with Christian
the Christian
Standard Bible,
it is the standard.
The conversation is now
not
over.
just for English
That's
people,
right,
like the English Standard. I mean, that's just if you happen to be English, but the Christian Standard.
If you love Jesus, this
if
is
you
what you're
really are a solid follower of Jesus, you will use the Christian Standard. Now, I don't think that's what they meant by it, but yeah, it does have that ring to it.
Thank you, Tom Rayner. You are amazing.
Let's hope all these people we're referencing watch these videos.
I believe they will.
I'm sure. I know they probably have been watching my videos. So tell us about your church. You're called Lake Church, and why? I mean, I know in our area, I don't know how true it is for you people, but there's like this influx of church names with river. It's just the most popular name in our area is to have river, but you're outside of the box a little bit. You have water, but it's lake.
It is. So the church's official name is Lake Sunapee Baptist Church. We started in Sunapee, which if you're in New Hampshire, you may have heard of that before. We have skiing and we have water sports right on Lake Sunapee. And the church had been in existence in the town of Sunapee for about 35 years. And we moved about 4 years ago, one town over from Sunapee to Newport. And so geographically, Lake Sunapee is still there, but it was really confusing for people, especially people from Florida coming up and looking for the church, and they say Lake Sunapee, but why is it in Newport? And then now that we've opened a location in Claremont, so we shortened it. We say our official name is Lake Sunapee Baptist Church, but our logo or our nickname is Lake Church. And we've been really happy with that. We're still staying with the water theme, so not getting too far
It gives you
out.
a connection with your roots, how the church started, Lake Sunapee, but it doesn't tie you in so much geographically to that exact spot.
Absolutely.
And Lake Church, and we'll show the logo. It's a great logo. What does it represent?
So one of our themes is the life ring, and one of our values, we believe that when the church prays, captives get set free. We exist so that people who are far from God will be found filled with new life in Christ. And so we've always had like a rescue theme. And clear back 9 years ago, we started using a life ring as part of our logo. So we put Lake Church and a life ring around it.
That's great. And I know that your heart is evangelism, as I mentioned. And so I want to talk about that. When you started, Lake Sunapee Church, Lake Church now, had been around for quite a while. And so when you got there, you think you told me there were about 12 people in the church in this little town?
Yes. And it was a town of about 2,800 people. Yeah. We had around 12 people in the church. When Crystal and I first moved to New Hampshire, we were planning to do a church plant in Concord. It was, at that time, the last capital without a Southern Baptist church.
And Concord's pretty big.
It is.
For New Hampshire,
yes.
It's quite populated.
They have a Dairy Queen now.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah.
But when we came here, my dad was actually an interim pastor, and he was filling in at doing pulpit supply and helping with some of the revitalization at Lake Church. And so we came to visit my parents, and the church asked if Crystal and I would come there, if we would consider pastoring. And God supernaturally, even though it wasn't our plan initially, God supernaturally gave us a love for Sullivan County and for the community. And so we came back after praying about it and said, we want to spend our lives here. We feel like this is where God is calling us to be. Yep. And guys, once again, God's plan is so much better than ours. If he ever lets you win, you lose. So always let him win.
That's right. So you started there in this pretty small town. There were about 12 people.
Yes.
And then what happened? You went there, 12 people, and they all loved you, and it immediately exploded.
Absolutely. So I think We had a few people that wintered in Florida, and so it felt like half the congregation was gone because I accepted the pastorate in August, and then next comes winter. No, fall's there, but it felt like
The winters can be a little long here.
It's different. Yeah, it's different than Kansas for sure.
Yeah.
So we had some people that went to Florida, but they did come back, praise Jesus. But we also had some people that moved out of state. We had a couple of people that passed away. And so it went from members, it went from 12 members down to 6 members within the first 6 months under my expert pastoral leadership, grew the church down 50%.
You're kind of like Gideon, though, right? With too many people, we need less.
That's right.
We need the right people.
There was more space in the room at that point, but
which it was only held 38 people.
That was our seating capacity, 43 if you count sound techs, but it was pretty small. But then I remember telling Crystal, man, if we ever just break 15, I'll be happy. I'll never ask God for anything ever again, because just 15 people in one space in Sunapee in New England, that would be amazing. But God's plans are greater than ours. Our first person that we got to introduce to Jesus was a lady named Millie. And she hadn't been in a church service in about 30 plus years, had been estranged from her family, had made some difficult life choices. And after giving her life to Christ, she was just completely transformed.
Wow.
And it led to a transformation through some of her family members. And also for our church, they really began to take hold of this idea of rescue. And that we exist as an organism, not just for those 6 of us who are here, but to share the good news of Jesus with the larger community. And the rest is God's history. He's been doing an amazing work.
So Millie was the first person, and it kind of reminds me of what we talked about before, the Samaritan woman, and how that sparked something in another area. And here you were, and you reached this person, and then it sparked something. And so you went from 12 down to 6. And where are you at now as far as, church attendance and everything? And I know it's a big, long story because you're in a different building.
Right.
But let's just focus on how many people have been reached, that sort of thing.
For recent numbers, last year, 2018, we had 43 people who took their next step and were baptized after making the decision to follow Jesus. And that's been pretty exciting, what God's been doing. We have several hundred people that worship with us every week in Newport, now in Claremont.
This is the Claremont building that we're in here that you guys just got. I want to hold off on buildings, though.
Yes.
And, just talk about, you've reached all these people, and really God has done it. I know that's what you would say. And you're in an area, and I like to say that we're called to be fishers of men. Jesus said that. But in New England, it's more like ice fishing, because you have some layers you got to get through, and once you do, you get down there, and there are people that you reach, and so I see you doing that. But what are the methods of fishing that you have found God has used?
So we found, in fact, one of our themes has been one at a time, and seeing an individual. And I think sometimes we're looking for the big thing. And if Jesus wants to send revival and a whole community gets saved in a weekend, that's amazing. I'm all for that. But in the meantime, there is a responsibility for long obedience in the same direction. I think it's Mark Batterson that said that first. And so just reaching people one at a time. And then once their lives have been transformed by the gospel, they have a whole family, I think the Greek word is oikos.
Yes,
they have a whole
household.
group of people around them who are really excited about the changes that they're seeing in their family member. And so most of our growth has been reaching somebody who's then reached a family member, a friend, a coworker, and just one at a time. It's not fancy, but it works. Yeah.
That's a really good reminder that it really is about one reaching one, and through those relationships. It's a reminder to all of us. That's how we're all part of this, reaching people. It's not necessarily the big things. It's those little things. That being said, we create a climate of evangelism, and I think you've done a great job of that. It's the individuals reaching out, but you also do events because it helps you collectively to be working together and to keep your heart and mind on evangelism.
Amen.
So you've done Judgment House.
We have. This will be our 4th year coming up the end of October doing Judgment House. Last year we had 60 people who made commitments to Christ. They gave their life to Jesus. Wow. And it's a combination of people who maybe grew up in church. They knew about Jesus, the historical figure, but they didn't know him personally. And also people just looking for something fun to do around Halloween. Yeah. And so they'll come
it's kind of like a haunted house event in a way.
Yeah.
But you do it at a church, and they go through like a tour group on a guided tour through this whole thing. And it's not just scary stuff. It's actually different scenes,
right,
following people in the story. And then at the end of the stories, these people die, and they have to face their choices in life and whether they know Christ or not. So it's really a chance to share the gospel.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's been in drama knows it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And one of our core values of the church is to have fun.
That's a good value.
Jesus
that's a good value.
was amazing. If you knew him, you would love him.
Yes.
But he was always having fun in the gospel. And so we'll use that. We'll say, if you're looking for a safe, fun way to spend your Halloween weekend, come to Judgment House. But you're right. Our purpose is to introduce people to Jesus that haven't met him yet. Also on the fun theme, one of our first large expenses as a church back in the day when we were building seating capacity of 38 was buying a bounce house. We decided to buy an inflatable bounce house instead of a sign, just put it in our kids ministry. And being dropped off at church and then seeing that, if it's your first time as a parent, you say, hey, you value my kids.
Yeah.
As a kid, you're like, I want to come back, and I'm bringing all my friends.
That's awesome. So that value of fun really pays off. That actually,
Amen.
God does use it. And he is the creator of fun, right?
That's right. The first thing God reveals about himself is that he is creative.
Yeah. So just quickly, in that growth, God has blessed you with property and bigger fish tanks for more fish.
Yes.
And so you went from a building that basically held 38 to 43. So the building that you're in now holds how many people?
Around 170.
Wow. Okay. So pretty big building. And then as if that's not enough, that's not the first or only church that's given you property.
Right. Yes.
And you are now expanding into Claremont because you have this space here. And it's beautiful. This is a historic church building that's been here, but it hasn't been used for like 30 years for a church service, something like that. And so you had to pay how much? What was the grand total that you had to pay to get this building here?
So it's so funny. We spent, the church, even before we got there, spent decades praying for a larger space. And then we spent, 5, 6, 7 years seeing people come to faith and then looking for a space to put them. And it's like all those prayers, not really, but it's like they all got hung up and then they all got answered within a short period of time. So,
God remembers the prayers.
Amen. So we had 2 congregations that gave us their space in Newport, and then this space in Claremont, we were looking, one of the visions that God's given our leadership team is that we would have a location of Lake Church in every town in Sullivan County. And so Claremont was on the horizon. I know it's a city.
It is a city, yes.
This space in between the library and the fire station came available, and we put a bid on it. And when we put the bid, we prayed about it, and the number that just kept coming back was $700, which sounded ridiculous and embarrassing, but we did, and we were the high bid.
Wow.
And so God used that supernaturally, and the city of Claremont has just been amazing. Every person that we've had contact with has been positive. And we're also excited because of proximity to the high school and middle school. One of the things that we do is after-school programs, giving out food, Pop-Tarts, juices, toothbrushes to students as they're making their way home. And so the proximity is really good, too, for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're really close to the high school, and even the middle school, you're not far from that either. But incredible, $700?
$700.
And, I mean, this was a couple years ago, so $700 was worth a lot more back then. No,
that's right.
Like even then, $700 is only $700. It's crazy, but that's what God can do. And that's the theme I hear in this: is you follow the Lord from Kansas. You followed the Lord reaching people and helping people here to reach their friends and family. And then the Lord has just blessed you, answering prayer and giving you space. But it's because you're obeying. You're doing what He's called you to do. Your church is on mission. And so God is really rewarding. And I think we see that so much in the Bible, when we give and when we do the things God tells us, like that boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, right? Amen. That little lunch, he gives it and Jesus multiplies it. It's like we're hearing that in your story here. Amen. The multiplication of the little that you give.
Gloria a Dios. God is good.
Yes, that's awesome.
And He does obedience. He rewards obedience. He rewards faithfulness. I feel like oftentimes as Christians, not just in the Northeast, but all over, we feel like there's limits to resources because we know that we're limited. But God is not limited. Moses said it best. His arm is not shortened. His credit cards are not maxed out. That may be a paraphrase, but God has all resources.
That was from the Message.
That's right. Yeah. And so if we'll just be faithful to obey, to do what He asks us to do, He's not worried about what our next step is. He's just worried about our obedience.
That's good. So you've probably gotten a lot of these ideas from reading the Bible, and I know you read it quite a bit, and now we know what translation you read from. But you've also probably gleaned things from other Christians who've written. And, aside from my book, what are some authors that... can we have a copy? Yeah, we just happen to have it here.
There's a groundbreaking new book out. If you haven't read it yet, God Matters by Tim Frisch.
Man, I didn't realize how much this video was going to end up being a plug for me. So, but honestly, what are some authors? You don't have to name all that you like, but what are some that you've found particularly helpful to you, or ones that you just have learned a lot from?
So early on, a book that really made an impact on me, surprisingly, actually, was Neil Cole. He's an amazing author, an amazing evangelist, and he wrote a book called Search and Rescue. Okay. And I think maybe 15 years ago, that's what started formulating the idea of the rescue and the theme that the church is on. Now
he's more in like the house church movement today. Was he even back then?
He was.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's been part of his thinking.
So it's a different model. But
sure.
The heart behind his model is amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and
definitely.
It's exciting what God is doing there. So Neil Cole, Search and Rescue. Rick Warren, the Purpose-Driven Church. And he is such a systems guy. I would love to be able to wake up and think through thought processes the way that he does. But
administration.
Yes,
right?
Amen. Him and Andy Stanley.
Yeah.
But he really helped me see that there are specific paths that God wants people to be on and finding their space. Once we become a believer, that's not it. There's more for us, and there's a place for us to serve in the church. And then also early on, but Bill Hybels, he did a talk on how to waste your life. From Acts chapter 2. And he said, if you're still looking for ideas on what to spend your life in, invest in a local church. It's the only thing that matters. She's the only thing that'll make a difference. So those were some early authors. And then, of course, God Matters by Tim Frisch.
Yes, of course. But we don't want to talk about that too much. But I know recently, too, we got to go to an event together where Francis Chan was speaking, and I know that you liked that book he wrote recently called Letters to the Church.
Yes, that is a good book.
So, I mean, I'm sure we could name 100 authors, but he's another one who I think has been good.
And I love listening to it. Not everybody reads, anymore, but True. YouTube is awesome. Yeah. And he has some amazing messages on YouTube.
Yeah. He's an amazing communicator. I think we've talked about this. Yes. He's this kind of guy that gets up, and when he starts, you're like, does he even know what he wants to say, or has he prepared? And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're like, whoa!
That's right.
He just hits you, because he has been steeping and thinking about these things very, very deeply. And really,
another good book that's coming out here in about a week. Something's Got to Change by David Platt.
Oh, Platt, yes,
It's a phenomenal book.
Yeah.
Go out and buy it. You'll love it. It'll wreck your life.
Yeah, well, Platt wrote Radical.
Yes.
And Counterculture, and some really life-changing. And his background was in missions, I think.
It is.
And
as a local pastor.
Yes.
But he talks about in a new book coming out that he was headed to the mission field, and then God called him to be the director of IMB, which is the largest mission-sending organization in the world. And so he struggled with, do I go or do I help send people to go?
Yeah, hard. And from what I know, I don't think he's in that position of now.
No.
But so he did follow God's call, but now he's doing local pastoring in the States.
He is a McLean Bible Church,
Wow.
and they're sending missions teams all over the world, and
Wow.
he's getting to lead teams, especially in Nepal. What God is doing is amazing.
Wow.
It really is a great time to be alive. We have more access to resources than at any other time in Christendom. So if you're not learning or growing, man, get on YouTube, buy a book, read the Bible.
And the last person we mentioned is a fellow Baptist. We're both from a Baptist background, but we like reading people from different backgrounds. But as a Baptist, we can be known a little bit, maybe a little bit, for being a little divided.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
I don't know where this is coming from.
Yeah, I know. Who would say that? But what are your thoughts? I mean, as a Baptist, you, I have seen, really have a desire to work with other churches. You know, so why does a Baptist like you want to work with churches that aren't Baptist?
It's a great question. So there's two people in Sullivan County that have really influenced me in regards to connections with other churches. And I would say the churches that God has placed within this county are amazing. There are so many good churches here, and it's exciting the leaders that God has brought to this community. But Tim Frisch, when he started the Connect Center, I remember thinking, a Baptist who cares about unity and connection, like, is that even possible? That's exciting. And so you really helped, I think, with the unity in this area in our county. And so we're so thankful for you. And then also Grace River used to do an event called Monday for Men.
Yes.
And there would be people from all over the Northeast that would come on a Monday night and just celebrate Jesus. And I remember looking at that as being new to the Northeast and not having seen that out in Kansas. And I said, this is amazing that we have Baptists and Anglicans and Charismatics, and they're worshiping together. I wonder if this is what heaven's going to be like. Yeah. And then, of course, there's Jesus, great guy. You would love him if you know him. And he said, it's by your love for one another, all people will know that you're my disciples. And so
it's like he wanted us to get along.
I really think that he did. Like, the key to reaching Sullivan County is unity.
Interesting you say that, because I was wondering how you felt about unity in relation to mission. And that is just such a clear-cut statement, that if Sullivan County and areas like ours are going to be reached, unity is key. Why do you feel that way about unity?
One, I believe that Jesus blesses and he provides resources to those when we're willing to humble ourselves. Have this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped, but he humbled himself, took on the form of a servant. So even if I know it all, and I have it all, and I'm the best at everything that I do, if I'm following Jesus, then I've got to be willing to put that to the side so that I can serve my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I certainly know, I don't know anything. Like, the longer I follow Jesus, the less I realize about who I am. And I learn so much from the other streams of Christianity. So I think Jesus blesses that. He blesses unity. He blesses humility. If we humble ourselves, he will exalt us, and he'll exalt the work that he's called us to. But also the world. Like, in New Hampshire, we're in an area where 98% of the people don't know Jesus. And they don't understand why you have 3 churches in a community who don't speak to each other, don't eat lunch together. And so when we come together to do things, they're like, maybe there's something to this.
So you've given a few examples of seeing unity. What is it about unity? I mean, how does it happen? Why are the churches around here unifying, in your opinion? What is it that's bringing? Because in other places, there's more of a struggle, I think, for even evangelical churches that believe the gospel to come together. So what do you think are the dynamics that God is using to bring churches together?
Well, I guess first I'll go back to theologically.
Yep.
Because I think that drives action.
Sure.
But I believe that theologically that God is preparing for a great soul harvest.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a nameless, faceless revival. And it's not going to be what happens on platforms or stages.
Yeah.
But it's going to be everyone who knows the name of Jesus.
That's cool.
Is going to be sharing Jesus. And so the time for building kingdoms and silos is over. And Jesus will not share his glory with anyone else. And so theologically, when we recognize that there's no room for me and Jesus, then we just lift up the name of Jesus. And we humble ourselves in unity under his name, under his banner, and then allow him to do what he wants to do. Practically, that means that we have to be willing to say, all right, if I don't get to use my gifts, the opportunity for ministry doesn't exist so that I can use my gifts. I'm here so that I can serve. So if I'm a teacher and I don't get to be the one who always teaches, that's okay. If I'm a leader and I don't always get to be the one who leads, that's okay.
Yeah.
We humble ourselves and then allow Jesus to get his name.
So good. Now, there are a lot of good things obviously God is doing, but there are still always obstacles to unity. And what do you think are some of the things that make it hard to be unified? And I really want to encourage Christians out there that desire this. We need to know that not only is God telling us in the Bible that he wants us to be together, but I really believe because it's God's vision,
Amen.
he's going to do things
Amen.
if we trust him to bring us together. But there are obstacles.
Sure.
There are difficult things. And what are some of the things you think that get in the way?
Offense. I think it's easy for us to be offended, even just with
Well, not me.
Yeah.
I never get offended.
Absolutely.
It's tough, isn't it?
It is.
Because when it's you, it's different.
Even when it's our own sex. Like if we have sex, SECTS.
Thank you, yes.
Even within our own groups,
Yep.
we find someone who does something differently than us, and I was like, but you had it in the Bible. I mean, the Jerusalem Council, Paul goes back and he's like, Gentiles are getting saved, and not only are they getting saved, but God's filling them with the Holy Spirit. And they're like, that's wonderful. They just got to have an operation, and they've got to learn all the laws of Moses, and then we're going to let them in, and then they'll belong. And so the church has always struggled with, all right, how close do I get to you?
Yes.
Even though we have some differences.
Right.
And so offense is one. We've got to be willing to put offense to the side. Pride. Once we have truth, we feel like, I'm special. Like we've been out of the gutter a couple years, and we know that it was all God's grace. But now we look at other people and like, I was never that bad. I would never do something like that. So pride, offense, and the work of the enemy.
Yeah.
Like the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Yeah. And so he'll take opportunities. I'm convinced sometimes between my mouth and someone else's ears, he'll take the words and he'll twist them just a little bit. And so we've got to stay in the Spirit and be pursuing Christ and saying, I'm willing to die. I have no rights. I'm just a bondservant to Christ, and so I have no right to be offended. I have no right to be proud. I just want to serve Jesus.
And it's good to be reminded in light of everything you're talking about that these obstacles are nothing new, because the first disciples didn't always get along.
That's right.
And Jesus brought a zealot, Simon
Amen.
the Zealot,
Amen.
who he was a nationalist.
That's
and
right.
would want to assassinate people to promote the cause of Israel with what they would have looked at as a traitor tax collector,
Right.
the opposite. And Jesus is bringing these people together. So it kind of makes sense we struggle because Jesus is bringing so many different people
Absolutely.
from different backgrounds together.
And then when he took it international, he brought in a recovering Pharisee.
Isn't that cool? You know, the last person, but that ends up being very useful.
That's right.
Because if God could bring him to a point of seeing people as under God's community,
Amen.
even though they're from different backgrounds,
Amen.
if God could take a Pharisee and make him someone who loves all people, then he can take any one of us and do that. And so what a great example. I've got one more official question for you here.
Okay.
If you could write a book on anything, what do you think you would author? What would you want to write about?
Prayer.
Interesting. That's good. Now, why would you want to write on prayer?
So I'm a very type A, action-oriented individual.
Yeah.
Like, let's charge hell with a water pistol.
Right.
And at earlier stages in my ministry and even life, I would be frustrated by people who always wanted to pray. I was like, we need to just go do something. You know, let's just do something. But I'm really discovering that prayer is the difference. Prayer is where everything happens. There's in Acts chapter 12, there's a story about Peter being in jail, and the church prays. And so one of our core values, when the church prays, captives get set free.
Yeah.
And we've seen over the last 9 years, we've prayed through names of our town. We've prayed through streets within our cities that God's calling us to reach, prayer walking, praying by house numbers. And I could tell you crazy stories about people that nobody even invited to church, just randomly showing up and giving their life to Christ.
Yes.
But somebody had prayed through that neighborhood a week prior. And so even looking back on some of the growth that we've experienced, it was after the movie War Room came out. And we did a showing at our church, and had so many people that begin to recognize that prayer is where the battle is won. So if I had one topic, it would be about prayer.
That's a really good way to remind us in light of everything we've talked about. Because actually everything we've been saying, I think people are listening and it's kind of like, wow, this is really amazing. But you attribute it in many ways to prayer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so what a reminder for all of us. And it's like, wow, doesn't that remind us of something someone said about praying in secret and will be rewarded openly? And that if you continue to ask, your prayers will be answered by the Father. Oh yeah, that was Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
He told us to pray. Mm-hmm. All right, well, we're running out of time here, but I wanted to say thank you for being the first person on my conversation series.
Thank
you
you,
were
Tim.
an awesome guest, and actually you were so good, I want to keep the conversation going, and I'll probably circle back around to you. And I think my audience here probably is really enjoying this conversation. So we're going to continue to do these and talk to different people. I also want to thank, behind the scenes, we have Joe Blaha helping us out with the cameras today. So thank you to Joe. And thank you all of you for watching my channel. And hope you will continue to watch these videos from a Frisch perspective.